This week's episode is with Shivani Uberoi. Shivani and I worked at Sky together for probably about 10 years, but we never actually met. So Shivani started networks like Women in Leadership and Multiculture at Sky, networks that are really impacting the Sky culture and making it more inclusive and more diverse. We have a great conversation about her journey into leadership, first starting at PwC, then starting her career at Sky, and how she grew into leadership through things like the networks that she started, having to learn to manage up and manage senior leaders and senior execs within Sky. We also talk about where does that ability to challenge and to change the status quo come from. And she tells a quite heartbreaking story about an interaction she had with her grandma when she was young, and how that pushed her to become someone who challenges and who changes the status quo. I really enjoyed my conversation with Shivani, and I'm sure you will too. If you don't, I would love for you to let me know. Email me hello@dunamiseq.com, and I'd love to hear your feedback, good or bad. So I'm Tolu. I started this podcast so that I could connect people like you with leaders like Shivani, people who lead with great emotional intelligence, so that you can learn to lead yourself and others better with emotional intelligence. Let's get into the episode. Shivani, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. So you're someone that I've seen from afar because we were both at Sky for quite a long time. So it's really, really great to actually meet you and hear some of your journey.
I think it's interesting because I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
And because I know you from LinkedIn, and because of course we worked at Sky together, but we actually never met in person, which is actually quite crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do feel like I have met you before.
Yeah, I know, right? Because I've seen so much of you on social media, and that's what I think is great about social media, is that connection without necessarily having met someone. So it does make things like this quite cool, actually.
Yeah, I think I'm really late to social media, so
Okay.
I was kind of like adverse to it for years, and I've tried to like not use it. And then it's only when I left Sky, actually, I started posting on LinkedIn. But it's been really nice actually to connect to people like you, and then reconnect with people at Sky, and I guess keep those relationships going. Because I was at Sky for 13 years and then I was
Mm,
gone, and
mm,
actually there was that feeling of, wow, now I feel all alone. And then
yeah.
actually by connecting and speaking to people on social media, that sense of, I guess, yeah, being part of that community is still there.
Yeah. And the Sky community on LinkedIn is awesome. Like they're always like popping up in my comments and stuff. And like, yeah, it still feels a bit like home in a lot of ways. Like,
Yeah, and so supportive, and it's
yeah,
just, yeah, it's really nice. Yeah.
yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. So you mentioned you were at Sky for 13 years. What would you say
hmm
are the top things you learned about leadership while you were at Sky?
I guess the first thing is it's hard. And that's the first thing that goes to my mind. And I think when you are at the start of your career, you really just want to be a leader, right? And you
Mm,
see all the great things about being a leader, the power that comes with it, the autonomy that comes with
yeah.
it. And I think once you start going on your leadership journey, you start to realize that actually, yes, the autonomy is great. And yes, the responsibility and power is great to a degree. But actually, there is a lot of challenges that come with it as well. Whether that's with like people management, whether that's keeping your team inspired and motivated, whether it's like protecting them from the stress and overwhelm that you might be feeling. And actually, there's a lot of weight and responsibility. And that can be quite hard, actually. And I think, yeah, you don't appreciate that until you become a leader.
I think like the hard moments are the hidden moments. So like everything that you just mentioned, people don't see that from the outside. They don't see when your team's demotivated and you have to figure out. They don't necessarily see the low performers that you have to figure out. So they see all the glamour of like you're on the stage and you're doing this and you're doing that, but they don't see the hidden moments.
Exactly, which is why you don't know about it until you become one, and then you realize, wow, okay. So that would be number one.
Okay.
So you asked me three. So second, what was the question again?
So what are the top three things that you learned about leadership from your time
Learned.
at Sky?
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah. So first, it's hard. Second, there's like no right way of being a leader. I think again, when you're looking at your role models of leaderships, and I think when I started at Sky, there were quite similar leaders who
Mm,
led in a very similar way,
mm,
and I didn't maybe possess all of those same, I guess, attributes. And I guess that gave me a bit of imposter syndrome. Actually,
mm,
can I be a leader?
mm,
And actually, and then I became a leader, and I guess my journey to becoming a leader, I realized actually I have some other skills that actually are really useful to being a leader, and there is no one way.
mm,
And I think that was really brilliant. to, I guess, dispel that myth that can also be out there that there is one way to lead, and that's just not right.
Mm. Mm. So you mentioned your journey kind of to leadership. What did that look like a little bit?
So my career was very mixed and very not traditional. So I started my career in finance.
Okay.
So finance is quite hierarchical. So you come in, you qualify, and then you essentially start climbing the ladder. But it's quite black and white, to the point that, they give you a rough indication in 2 to 3 years you'll be a
Yeah.
manager, and then senior manager, and then head of. So I guess that climb started pretty early on, and I then started doing some diversity work on the side, and I think that gave me, I guess, more breadth of skills, which then
Yeah.
allowed me to maybe climb that ladder a bit quicker, potentially than I thought I could. And then I became head of, I can't remember how many years ago, and then I guess I had my first biggest team where I started really understanding the challenges of leadership, and how to motivate when you're now actually a leader. Because I think I was doing it when I was a manager, and
Mm.
actually I remember in my reviews, all my senior leaders always used to say how actually my people skills were really good, and they would sometimes come to me for advice. But I
Oh
think
wow.
when I then became a leader, yeah, it was just different. I think I found it easier when I didn't have to be one, if you know what I mean.
So when you were a manager, you weren't actually
Mm.
managing people. Is that what
I
you mean?
was, but like one or two. Like when I
Okay.
think about leadership, I think of it slightly different than managing. So when I was a manager,
Okay.
I had a couple of people, and I guess my role was really about managing the day to day, managing the development.
Got
And
you.
then leadership really to me is more when you become, I guess, maybe like head of a department or a wider team, where it's actually is more about just managing the day-to-day priorities, but actually it's about motivating them,
Mm.
inspiring them,
Mm.
really making them understand how they connect to the bigger picture, which is different, right? And I think
Yeah.
leadership skills and managerial skills are really, really different. And a good manager doesn't mean they'll be a good leader, and vice versa.
Mm.
And I think I was actually a better leader than a manager, to be honest, because I think that part just came more naturally to me.
Okay.
And that's the part that I really enjoyed.
Mm.
But again, I think we don't necessarily think about it in that way.
Mm. Mm. Because I never thought of it in terms of that transition from manager to leader. Because I know there is a
Mm,
difference between managing and leading, but I feel like, I guess for me, I've always kind of lent more towards the leading than the managing. So
mm.
I didn't necessarily, but you're right, it is a transition from I'm a manager to, okay, now I have broader responsibilities. Now I have to maybe lead outside of my comfort zone and things that I know. So you're right, it's definitely a bit different.
And I think like we get caught up in the day to day, and then often many people don't do the leadership that they need to do, because
Mm.
it almost gets deprioritized because we're focused on the deliverables and the day to day tasks that we need to do. But it is such an important part. And I think maybe if we talk about it more, it brings it to life a little bit more, and then maybe people prioritize it more.
Mm. Mm. Because I think that you get so used to being a doer, but as a
Mm.
leader, like that's what you're meant to do almost the least of. You're meant to lead things and it's hard.
Well, exactly. Like one day you're a doer, then you're promoted, and then you're a leader. And for some of us, if it happens that quickly, you're like, oh, right, now I need to do this whole big thing. But did I get trained? Have I got the right
Yeah.
skill? Like, do we even think about it in that way? And often we don't. So actually, which is why, yeah, there's lots of managers that are not good leaders, because they haven't been given that support, and they haven't even had those conversations what good leadership looks like. Because again, like,
Mm.
we're so focused on the doing, and then
Mm.
when you become a manager, you're more responsible for the doing of your team,
Mm.
which is right. But actually, your responsibility is so much more wider than that.
Mm. Mm. And that's something that I've really seen is that people are good at their job, so they get promoted, but they're not equipped with the skills because it's a very different skill set. So, what were some of the ways that you learned to grow as a leader?
I think for me, like I said before, I think some of it just came more naturally because I'm a very people person. I think, I have high levels of emotional intelligence. I like to really like get to know people, listen to them. And I think part of that was just natural. So I think I naturally started doing the things that leaders should do
Mm.
around inspiring the team and
Mm.
motivating the team. And I think a lot of it comes by taking that step back and reflecting and
Mm.
thinking about, okay, like what is my responsibility wider than how do I actually make sure my team gets stuff done? And it isn't just about making sure they understand the task, right? It's about making sure they're motivated to do it. It's making sure that they engage to do it. It's also just to make sure you understand that everyone also has their life outside of work, and that can also impact their performance. So as a good leader, you need to be mindful of that. And I think just not being like tunnel visioned on the role and the job and the task is so important. So for me, I think it did come quite naturally. I didn't go on a leadership course or any of those things. I think part of it just came with that self-reflection, and I guess looking at leaders above me and just thinking about who's doing it well and who isn't, like which leaders are truly my role models and which ones are not, and then just thinking about actually, so what do they do? And the good ones get to know their teams and make time for, team meetings and team events outside of just the day job. And I guess, yeah, maybe I learned from watching them and understanding it, that's the kind of leader I want to be, and maybe emulate a little bit of what they were doing.
Who would you say was your most inspirational leader or the best leader that you've had?
Do you want a name or you want a
If you're
name?
comfortable to, yeah.
Yeah,
This
I
is the
mean, she'd
positive
love
thing,
it.
so you can name the
Yeah, no,
positive things.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So Bella,
Okay.
I don't know if you knew her at Sky, but she was amazing. I think her ability to inspire people and motivate them, yet also get stuff done,
Mm,
I think was incredible.
mm,
And I mean, I always say my career wouldn't be where it is if it wasn't for her, because she
mm,
also gave me the courage to step outside my comfort zone and really
mm,
believed in me.
mm,
Um, and I remember just watching her from afar and how she could just motivate a room. I thought it was just so inspiring. And she wasn't your typical leader, like that the traditional leaders that I used to see at the early of my career.
mm,
She was kinder, but
mm,
she was also, really determined, and just having that breadth I thought was amazing.
mm.
Because that was always the kind of type of leader I wanted to be, but I didn't have enough role models. And so when I saw her, I was like, oh, she's brilliant. And, she leads exactly the way I'd want to. And then, yeah, I was lucky enough to work for her, which I think, yeah, was a big catalyst for like my career.
Mm. I've heard a lot about Bella, but I've never met her. But I always hear this kind of thing about her, that she's just amazing.
She's amazing. Yeah, really
Mm,
amazing.
mm. So you mentioned earlier a little bit about emotional intelligence. So what does emotional intelligence mean to you?
So I guess for me, it starts with being aware of my own emotions. And I think that's so important as a leader, because when we become a leader of people, our emotions can massively impact them.
Mm,
And I remember being really conscious about that at Sky, like if I was feeling stressed or overwhelmed, that being really aware of how that was impacting my behavior, my tone, so
mm,
important.
mm,
So I think, yeah, being in tune with your own emotions and how it's impacting your behaviors is really important, especially
mm,
in the leadership context. But also now as a parent, because I'm a mum of two kids, and I've realized when I'm really stressed, my daughter will get stressed. So I need to like take a moment, take a breath, um, and yeah, really like center myself. Otherwise, yeah, it will manifest in her own emotions. And I think it's the same in the workplace.
mm,
Your emotions is almost like a domino effect, right? It's contagious. So yeah, being aware of your own emotions, I think, is really important. And then secondly, being aware of other people's emotions and really understanding them. Because often what I find is that you might not see it, especially in the workplace where people might be like masking their emotions, not wanting to be vulnerable because, they might think it shows them as weak, etc.
mm,
So I think being in tune to what's really going on is really important. I think the only way you can do that is by, really actively listening
mm,
and just taking that time, because sometimes I see emotions like manifest as anger, like people might be getting stressed and angry, but actually what's underneath that is fear of failure, or something else, or maybe something else going on at home. And I think it's important not to react to that big emotion that you're seeing, and really take the time to understand what's really going on. And I think that's true emotional intelligence.
How would you how would you suggest that someone does that? Because I think in the moment sometimes there's so much going on. So what's been helpful for you in terms of being able to take that step back and detach a little bit from it?
I think not reacting in the moment. So if somebody's getting stressed, um, listening to them, but just taking that time to pause, I think is really important.
Mm.
And then taking some time out before you then react, thinking, and I think just slowing down is really important. And you know how
Mm.
it is at Sky, and I'm sure many corporate workplaces, the pace is really, really,
Very
really
fast.
fast. So
Mm.
sometimes you have to just really force yourself to slow down and say, actually, it's getting really heated, or people are getting stressed, or there's something else going on. Like, let's just slow down. Like, let's cut short a meeting. Let's speak later this afternoon. And
Mm.
actually, yeah, take that time to create those pauses in the day, I think are really important, because I think when we're going at like 100 miles an hour, we will
Mm.
miss all of that stuff.
Mm.
So actually trying to intentionally put those breaks and pauses in the day is
Mm.
important.
Mm. So you just mentioned about, maybe let's meet later and things like that. And I think sometimes that's easy as like you're a senior person, you're a head of department. So you have that kind of, no, let's stop now, and you can do that. But what I think I've seen about your career is that you've really successfully managed up quite a lot to
Mm.
people who are, a couple of levels above you. So how have you been able to do that? Like, where did you learn about being able to manage up to more senior people so that you can, in that situation, for example, be able to say, look, let's slow down and have a moment, but even though you might not be the most senior person?
I don't know how I learned it, if I'm honest. I think it will probably come down to like my childhood or something.
Okay.
Um, but I remember on that point that a really senior leader, an exec at Sky, once said to me when I asked him for feedback, was one of the things that he likes most about me is I don't treat him like an exec, that I speak to him as
Wow.
a normal person and that I challenge him. He's like, there's so many people that just say, oh, yeah, yeah, that's a great idea, even though it's not. And he's like, but you don't do that. And I was like, okay, great. And he told me that like maybe mid in my career, and then that gave me confidence to do it
Confident.
even
Yeah.
more.
Wow.
And the reason I think I did it with him is I had managed to build a relationship with him, and I think that was just about being human.
Yeah.
Um, I always look for connection with people just because, it makes life more interesting, and, life shouldn't just be about serious and talking about work, etc. So I always look for connection to get on with people. So
Mm.
I'd done that with him, and we connected on a human level. And yeah, he could be intimidating, as, often people are at senior
Mm.
leadership, but I think because I had a relationship with him helped. Also, I think because the work we were doing at that point, I was doing work around gender diversity and
Mm.
women in leadership. I was really passionate about that as well.
Mm.
So because I really believed in it,
Mm.
and I thought the things that they were talking about was wrong,
Mm.
I had the courage to say no, because
Mm.
I really believed in, I guess, the end
Mm.
goal. And I think that also helps to have that courage to do it. And, at the end of it, everyone is human. It's just a job title, right?
Yeah.
And everyone is human underneath. And, most of us are just making it up or guessing what we're doing or trying to figure it out. And I think experience helps, and I think that's really helped me. Getting that feedback was brilliant, and I think the more I did it, the more I then did it, because
Mm.
I realized that actually, yeah, people can be quite welcoming, not always, but they can be. And actually, if you end up getting the result that you want, then that's the most important thing.
I think I liked something that you said about connecting with him and find like a human connection,
Mm,
because so I was part of one of the multicultural networks at Sky, and some of the feedback that we had early was that, look, a lot of the managers are very different to us. They're older white men. I don't have much in common with them, and that kind of puts people off from trying to find that connection. So how have you what are some of the things that you found that are great connecting points to someone from an ethnically diverse background when you're engaging with some of the exec that might not be the same as you?
I think like it's quite easy to put people into boxes, right? And I get it. I mean, a lot of my friends are similar to me, right?
Mm.
Brown girls, because we have a lot more in common, and there's something called affinity bias, which
Yeah.
you may be aware of, which we are as humans drawn to people who remind us of ourselves, and
Mm.
that's more of a survival instinct. So sometimes we almost have to get over that to understand that actually underneath all of that, we are people, and
Mm.
we have the same emotions. We all get scared, we all get happy, we all get angry, and underneath that we are the same, and there is going to be things that we have in common. And I think working at Sky, one of the easiest things was TV shows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, just things like that,
Yeah.
we all watch, like, just, it's not like we watch specific TV shows. I mean, I do watch some Bollywood, but I also watch other mainstream TV
Yeah.
shows, right? Sport is a good one. Like, I'm a big cricket fan. And so, yeah, if I knew people were interested in cricket, I could strike up a conversation about that.
Mm,
Parenting, once I became a parent,
mm,
you can strike up a conversation around that.
mm.
Food, yeah, I'm a big foodie. Restaurant, there's so much.
So
Like we
much.
are so much more
Mm,
than our, our ethnic label or our gender identity. And I think
mm,
sometimes it's easier to connect with people who are from your community because you do have more in common, more obviously.
mm.
Um, and maybe it takes a bit more work, but I think just again reminding yourself that everyone is human. There is going to be, we will have something in common with everyone,
Yeah,
right? There's going to be
yeah.
something.
I love that. And I think that sometimes it's almost like a mental blockage because I think that when you grow up from a different culture, so like when I stepped home, it was like little Nigeria, right? It wasn't the same as it was out there. And you see those differences really starkly. And I think that sometimes it's easy to let that become a barrier from thinking that actually everybody is quite similar. So I went to a school where I was like the only black person for a long time. And so I very quickly learned that actually we're all quite similar. There are
Yeah.
definitely differences, but it's not insurmountable, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean we can't get on because of
Yeah.
course we can. But I think it is some of it is mental. And again, I think that just, dates back to, yeah, the way we're wired as humans, in terms of where we look for connection. But yeah, I think if we get over that mental block, and because we're not used to it, I think, like you said, if some people have been used to, yeah, growing up in an environment where there are lots of people that look like themselves, and then they go into an environment when we're not used to it. So it
Mm,
makes us withdraw. But
mm,
actually, yeah, so it does take a bit of like mental courage to almost get over that and say, you know what, most people are nice, right? Most
yeah,
people are nice
yeah,
and we'll find something in common.
yeah. Agreed, agreed. And I think that sometimes being different is actually a bit of an advantage because people remember you more. Like, my name's not Tom or Luke. Like, there's only one Tolu that most people will ever meet in their whole life. So it's like, if you embrace that difference, then actually you can also use it to your advantage a little bit.
Yeah, it makes you more interesting, right? Because yes, as
Exactly,
much as we'll have commonalities, there's going to be things about my like personality, my heritage that is more interesting to you because
exactly.
it's different. And I think, yeah, like honing in on that,
Mm,
yeah, it's really great actually,
mm,
and can make you stand out more. And now we live in a world where, we're trying to build our personal brand with like social media, etc.
mm,
Your at the center of your personal brand is your uniqueness.
mm.
And so I think it's really interesting that, we grow up trying to fit in, but
Yes.
actually then now we're trying to say, actually, what makes me different? What makes me great? What makes, make you unique? And
Mm,
yeah, I think we need to hone into that a lot earlier than maybe we do.
mm. I'm really interested in your upbringing and in your background because you mentioned that the feedback that you got was that you were quite willing to push back and to challenge. And I think for me growing up, I grew up Nigerian and like you don't challenge too much, right? Especially like your elders and things like that. So I'm really interested in your upbringing because I think like when I got to college and they were like, call your teacher Steve, I was like freaking out, like what? I'm not. It's not Uncle Steve or Mr. Steve. So it took me a little bit of time to kind of get out of that. But I'm really intrigued as to kind of like your upbringing and your background as to how you're just quite comfortable with that.
I think for me, it probably stems from being I'm one of three girls,
Mm,
and then we have a little brother, which is no coincidence because my mum was put under loads of pressure to have a boy because that's what it's like in Indian
right.
families.
Okay.
And I remember, and yeah, I have a very hazy memory of my childhood, but one of my early memories is my grandma basically telling me that they didn't want another girl because I was second, and also my skin was quite dark, and that's not good. Um,
Wow.
as a woman, right? Um, because essentially she said, you're a girl, it's pressure to get you married. So not only have we got another girl, we've got a girl with darker skin. So I just remember that she just told me that. Like it was just, this is just normal. I was like, I can't remember how old I was, but that really, like, I guess stuck with me. And I guess that unfairness of being a girl, meaning your life is just about getting married and it's about how you look. Um, yeah, really impacted, I guess, how I progressed from there. And I guess the rebel inside me, I guess, started to grow. It's like, no, like, this is not going to be a bad thing. I'm not going to let it.
Love that.
And yeah, so I think it just really just stemmed from there and just,
Mm,
proving that girls can do things that boys can do. And I used to love cricket growing up and again, I wasn't really allowed to play with the boys. They're like, it's not for girls. And I think that just that, yeah, desire to prove people wrong has always just been there. And yeah, I always stand up to elders and when they're essentially like, carrying forward things in the name of tradition, but
Yeah.
actually it's sexist or it's racist. And I'm like,
Mm.
no. And
Mm.
yeah, I think it all stems from that one conversation, probably from my
Wow.
grandma, where she told me I wasn't wanted. And I was like, wow,
Wow.
that's a lot, right? So yeah, I think it just stems from there because I knew, again, it wasn't just me. There were probably loads of girls around the world that are being told that they're not wanted. And I know, like, that happens, especially in Asian countries, and that's just not right. So yeah, that rebel in me, I think, grew from a very early age.
I love that was the response, because I think that sometimes cultural expectations can be really crushing, like
Mm,
really, really crushing. And even hearing that, like, I was a little bit crushed on the inside, like hearing that
yeah.
that's what like my grandma would say to me, like one of the people I love the most. So it's really admirable that that's the response that it invoked in you, and that's, you're just like, burn it all down. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine you could go both ways, right? And it did obviously impact my self-esteem and confidence as well.
Mm, mm,
But yeah, I think luckily I had that desire within me to like prove her wrong and just prove
mm,
everyone wrong. And yeah, I just, yeah, maybe naturally just felt this desire to like, yeah, like be there for all the girls, like,
mm,
across the nation that are being told is like this is not right.
mm.
So I mean, I didn't change my name when I got married.
Okay.
And partially it was because of that as well. And again, that's like rebellious behavior. But it's like actually one of the reasons people don't want girls is, oh, you lose your chain, right? Your heritage
Right.
because you lose your surname. I was like, okay, so I'm just not going to change my surname because now that's not a thing. Actually, girls can
Yeah.
also keep that line going. So yeah, yeah, that rebel in me is still alive.
Love it. Love it. A bit of competitive spirit is great. It's absolutely great. So, two of the things that you did at Sky was you started a couple of networks. You started the Multicultural Network and also the Women in Leadership Network. And as someone who's worked at Sky for a long time, I've seen the impact of those networks. So firstly, I wanted to say thank you, because it makes a massive difference for someone coming in after you. But I wanted to hear a little bit about the journey and the story of how you started not just one, but two networks.
Yeah, thank you. It's so good to hear that they're going strong as well. And they're one of the best things that I did while I was at Sky.
Mm,
And I think again that journey probably just evolved from my childhood, right? I then found myself in the workplace and I was often the only woman who looked like me in the room. And it can impact your self-esteem and your confidence. And when you
mm,
don't see role models like you start questioning yourself, like, can I get there? But yeah, one day it just dawned on me that there were going to be other people like me in other rooms across Sky. Like Sky's got
mm,
26,000 people. So I know like there's such power in connection and bringing people together. And that's
mm,
what I really wanted to do with the networks, both for women, but from people from ethnic backgrounds, is actually bring us together so actually we don't feel like
mm,
we're a minority. And there's so much power in sharing experiences with other people who have similar upbringings or have similar, I guess, anxieties, and just talking about them and being really vulnerable in a place that feels really safe. um so yeah, they really just grew from there. And I think part of it was also because the work that I was doing in my day job with women in leadership was around trying to create more gender diversity. And I saw there was so much power when I just brought women together in a room just to talk. Like we did loads
mm,
of focus groups, and the energy in the room was just
mm,
so amazing. And I thought we just need to do this more often. It shouldn't be part of this formal program where
mm,
only certain women get invited on. Actually, we should just be able to have these safe spaces everywhere we go.
mm.
And yeah, so it just grew from there.
And how did you find it leading a network? Because when you're like a head of or a manager, you've got direct kind of authority over people, right? Because you're their manager, so they kind of have to do it. One of the tough things sometimes about leading a network like that is that people are volunteering their time, and it's not their day job, they're doing on top of their day job. So what were some of the challenges that you had, and how did you overcome them in terms of leading people that aren't necessarily your direct reports?
Yeah, it's a good question because it is really, really hard. And I think that's when your true leadership is tested, because
Mm,
it's essentially about inspiring people to want to do it
mm,
because they are volunteering.
mm,
I guess what helped is all these people are passionate about the cause. And I think it's kind of just honing in on that passion and making sure people are seeing the fruits of their labor, understanding like the impact of what they're doing, even if their role seems like it's really small because they're, booking a speaker for an event, actually the impact of that event is all of these people have come and been inspired and grown in confidence. So I think making sure you're connecting those dots was really important, and really feeding back and making sure people were seeing that impact where possible as well. Also being able to understand everyone's individual motivations. I think when people are volunteers for a network, the main motivation is about driving change. Some of it also, like from a career perspective, getting new skills, getting in front of leadership, because it gave a good platform to do that. So being able to understand everyone's motivations and helping them and supporting them. Like I was really conscious about making sure I wasn't the only one presenting to the exec on this is what we're doing at a network. Like I would always try and put other people from the network in those rooms, and that again gave them the recognition that they really deserved. I was really conscious I didn't want to be the face of the network, because I thought there's a massive team behind it, and just ensuring that they were getting the recognition and they were also getting the opportunities that they wanted, really, really important.
And were there any challenges that you had in terms of when you were implementing the networks and trying to get them up and running? Was there any challenges that you had to overcome in terms of getting it approved or getting it done or getting it embedded in the culture?
I think there were no real challenges in setting it up. Everyone was really positive. From the exec, senior leadership, just tell us what you want to do. So that was really great. Even in getting volunteers for the committee, there was actually that was we were oversubscribed in anything, so we had to put a process in place and decided to do like rotation so people get to have chances every year. I guess the challenge was more embedding it into the culture, mainly because Sky's a massive organization and comms is hard. So it was just almost quite difficult, like getting it out there that the network exists and the purpose of it, etc. And also, I guess one of the other challenges is the backlash, like what about us, which we got from some communities. Because it's like, okay, great, you've got a women network and you've got a multicultural network, but we want a network and we want a network over here. And I mean, my answer always, that was great. I can help you set one up. Like, go for it, Yeah, just do it. So yeah, there was some of that. But other than that, to be honest, it was just about time to embed. Maybe some challenges in terms of, I think, within the multicultural space, because multicultural is wide, right? I think women's almost easier, not that all women are the same, but within the multicultural network, we have so many different ethnicities. So I was really aware of at the time that I didn't want to have a committee that was just like Indian or, just represented one part of, the multicultural that we have at Sky. So trying to have a diverse committee was really important. But I think just making sure we were doing things for everybody was just a bit of a challenge, I guess, because, limited time and resources, etc.
I think that thing of like, if you don't see what you want, start it is so important. So important.
So important, yeah, because I think sometimes people wait for permission, and I'm not the kind of person that does that. So, but like, just do it, right?
Do it,
yeah, exactly. As long as you're doing, you're not hurting anyone, you're not doing anything wrong. Just do it. And just follow your passion, and you will find other people who are just as passionate as you. And I think that was one brilliant thing about Sky, that I felt really empowered to just do stuff and set up committees, and yeah, it was great.
So I know we've talked a lot about Sky. I'd love to hear some about your life after Sky. So what have you been doing since then?
I just laughed because life after Sky is the hashtag.
Yeah, I know.
So that really made me laugh. It's so ingrained, isn't it? Life after Sky. So yeah, it's interesting as well, because I was at Sky for 13 years. I actually do think about my life, like life at Sky and life after Sky. That's like two phases of my life. It hasn't been that long though. I mean, only a few years, and I've done a few things, but it's been brilliant because I've given myself permission to experiment. Love that. I think it was just so important. I came out of Sky and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I was scared that, what if I do something and it doesn't work out? But I was like, at least I've tried, like it's such a good opportunity to try something. And I was very fortunate from a financial perspective and from a family perspective that I could do that for a short term. I almost had like a 1 year window where I'm
Okay.
like, okay, let me try something and see what happens. So I set up my own coaching and consultancy business. I did some coaching training. When I reflected on my career at Sky, one of the things I enjoyed the most was when I was working with people, motivating people, inspiring people, all of that stuff. And I really wanted to hone in on that. So the coaching and consultancy that I do is focused around EDI, being your authentic self at work. And then I also do work more around how do you create cultures where people can be themselves. So I work with leadership because, again, that's a lot of the work I did at Sky. And that was rewarding in another way because essentially I could see the challenges that people were finding to be themselves. And it's so important that I think we go both bottom up,
And
empowering
top
people
down.
to drive
Yeah.
change, but also top down.
Yeah.
And I couldn't decide which one I want to do, and I still don't know. So I'm just doing both,
Both. Yeah.
and we'll see where we go. And then I got a part-time job maybe 3 or 4 months ago with England Cricket Board. I talked about my passion for cricket started really early on, and they were recruiting in their diversity space. So that's really a big priority for them. And I remember when I saw that job, I was like, wow, it sounds brilliant, but I was just kicking off my business. So I went through those like motions of, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And it was advertised as full time. But again, maybe that rebelliousness in me where I just went for it. And then I said to them, look, I'd love it, but I can only do it part time. And thankfully they agreed. And now I'm managing both. And for now, it's brilliant. And I feel privileged every day that I get to do my own business and find my own way. And have the flexibility to do that, but I also have got a stable income, which I realized is really important. And then when I ran out of my funds, and thought actually, entrepreneurship is really hard actually, and I'm not that type of person that can be comfortable with not knowing where my next paycheck is coming from. That's just not me. So yeah, so I feel like I have a nice hybrid now where I've got a part-time role that I really love and I feel like I'm making a difference, but then I also have the flexibility of doing my own thing and following my passion.
That's awesome. And you also do some speaking as well, right?
Yeah, part of my consultancy and coaching side, I guess. Yeah, so I speak on various topics around EDI, how to drive inclusion in the workplace, but also I speak a lot with employee networks. I'm speaking to people about how to be the authentic self at work and how to find the courage to do that and build your self-esteem and confidence. And I love that stuff.
So we talked about your top 3 leadership lessons from Sky. What are your top 3 leadership lessons that you've learned post Sky?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, there's no such thing as failure, just feedback, which was a
Love that.
quote that I read
Yeah.
and really stuck with me because it's just so important and it's just so true. Like we can feel like we make a mistake and we failed, but it's not. It's just feedback. And I think just giving yourself permission to not be successful all the time is okay. And I think when I was at Sky, my career was just growing and I was just going up the hierarchy. I got so used to it. And I think for me, it's been, I think really important part of my personal growth actually to almost just not go backwards, but actually make some mistakes and do things that I'm actually not brilliant at and say, okay, that's fine, and I'm just learning about myself. And I think that's been really, really good.
Would you mind sharing like a feedback moment?
A feedback moment. So I thought, like, I came out of Sky and I was really good at what I did. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to start my own business and people are just going to book me up because obviously I'm great at what I do. But it didn't quite happen as quickly as I thought. Starting to get, external companies, to start engaging with me and trusting me took a lot longer than I anticipated. And I think part of that was because I hadn't spent time building my personal brand because I was just so internally focused at Sky and everyone at Sky knew me, right?
Yeah.
But when I came out of Sky, no one knew me, right?
I know how you feel.
Yeah, you know how I feel, right? And then I was like, Oh wow, okay. So
Yeah.
that was a big moment for me. That's actually it was almost like starting again. Okay, now I need
Okay.
to start building my brand, which is why I then
Yes.
started using LinkedIn and social media and
Mm.
really went on this journey of actually now I need to I also had to tap into like an uncomfortable part of me of like self-promotion because I think at Sky my work spoke for itself and I had some,
Yes.
brilliant advocates that would speak for me and say Shivani's great. Yeah, take a chance on her, but externally it doesn't work that way. So I had
Mm.
to like go on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm great. Look at all this great stuff that I've done. And that felt really uncomfortable, but I had to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was a real journey for me actually.
Okay.
And I'm still not super comfortable with it, but I understand it more, right? It's like actually
Mm.
that's what you need to do.
Mm.
And that's okay.
Mm.
And then you talk about failure, but it's really small things like you do a LinkedIn post and you don't get any likes, and that feels really crap, right? And I thought I was better than that. I
Yeah.
thought I'm not that type of person who cares about likes, I'm just not that kind of person. It turns out I do, right? I
Yeah.
really do. When people don't like my post, yeah, I don't like it. And yeah, and I've had to really work on that as well. That yeah, maybe I do
Mm.
need some external validation
Mm.
and actually I shouldn't, and how do I work on that?
Mm.
So I've like learned new things about myself that I now need to work on and I have been working on. um so yeah, but you don't realize until you put yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I can identify with so much of what you said as well. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey post Sky actually. I've like
Mm.
yeah, like so much rediscovery or new discovery as well about myself. And I
Mm.
think it's been brilliant because had I still been at Sky or in a safe corporate role, I would never have like learned all of these things about myself or put myself into these situations which haven't all been brilliant, but
Mm.
on reflection, I've learned a lot from.
Mm. Mm. I don't know if it feels the same for you, but I feel like for me, it's like it reminds me of when I left home to go to uni. Like I've been at
Mm,
home for like 18 years,
mm.
and now I'm going out into the world, getting my own house, buying my own stuff, and it's that's how it's felt for me in terms of leaving Sky after so long.
For me, when I left home to finally get to uni, it was just liberating, I'll be honest, right? I got my credit card, I got my student loan, and that was a brilliant feeling. I just felt like,
Yeah,
yeah, the world is my oyster. I
yeah,
think leaving Sky, there was a little bit of that, like the world
yeah,
is my oyster type of feeling that I
yeah,
can, I can, I can now create this new path. And that part was, yeah, like empowering, but in a scarier way
yeah,
because, I didn't really know what that path looks like, and I still don't, but I'm more
yeah.
comfortable with that.
Mm.
Like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 5 years. I have no
Mm.
idea. What is
Mm.
my job title going to be? Don't know, right?
Mm. Mm.
But I'm okay with that. And
Mm.
I think that's a great place to be.
And I feel like the path that you're on and the trail that you're blazing is going to be more than you could think of what it is, if that makes sense. So yes, you don't
Yeah.
know what your job title, but it could be something that doesn't even exist right now, but that's better than what you ever thought it was going to be.
And this is it, like, why limit yourself, right?
Yeah,
So I think, like, growing up at Sky, I always had my eye on a job title. Okay,
yes,
that's what I want to be in 2 years. That's what I want to be in
yes,
5 years. But then I always feel like you limit yourself because you're just so laser focused. But actually,
yeah,
there's so many other things that you could be and so many other
mm.
things that you could do. So
Mm.
actually, like, not thinking about it in that way has been really empowering. Actually, just
Mm.
knowing that, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do in 5 years. It
Mm.
could be something really cool. I don't know.
Mm.
But
Mm.
yeah, I'm just like not limiting myself.
Mm. I'm excited to see where you end up. So,
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Don't know. God. Back at
Shivani,
Sky? Who knows, right?
wow,
Who
who
knows?
knows?
Could be CEO
Who
of
knows?
Sky in 5 years' time.
People
Who
keep telling
knows?
me like, do I want to go back to Sky? I'm like, I'm more expensive now than I was then, so I don't know if that's gonna happen.
You never know. I never say never. I mean, I can't
Yeah,
see it happening,
yeah.
but I never say never.
Never say never. You never know what happens.
Exactly.
Shivani, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for being vulnerable with your journey as well. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I didn't expect to be so vulnerable, but I think that's just where the conversation took us. But I guess that's not a bad thing either. But yeah, no, thank you. I really enjoyed that conversation.
Good, and I'm sure this is going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much,
I hope so. Thank you.
and thank you guys for listening. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching this episode of the Dunamis EQ Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, flick through our channel and there's loads more that you can watch. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can hear first when new episodes drop. We'll catch you on the next episode.